In 1895, young American heiresses crossed the Atlantic with trunks of fortune and many never returned the same. They were called the Dollar Duchesses, sold for titles, traded for prestige, and silenced beneath English crowns. But one of them, Charlotte Harrington, refused to be erased. This isn't just history, it's survival. Scandal and transformation played out in gilded ballrooms and shadowed drawing rooms. Before we dive in, hit the subscribe button and tell us where in the world you're watching from. Now, settle in, adjust your pillows, pull up that blanket, because we're stepping into London, 1895. The fog tastes of coal, the whispers taste of scandal, and the first step Charlotte takes inside Harrington House will decide whether she becomes a pawn or an empire. Charlotte Miller stirred in her bed, facing her first morning in London. She opened her eyes to the reality of Harrington House, room manor with more history than warmth. The air felt heavy, as though every wall was soaked in centuries of whispers, duty, and judgment. The silence was startling. No clamor of New York streets, no laughter of siblings downstairs, groaning echo of pipes and the faraway shuffle of servants. Then her eyes landed on the portrait-stowering paintings of dukes and duchesses long gone, hanging in heavy gilded frames. Their eyes seemed to follow her, sharp and unyielding. Do I belong here, she wondered, or are they silently mocking me, reminding me that I am a stranger who bought her way into their family? Charlotte was not alone in this fate. She was one of many, an American heiress turned English duchess, a dollar princess in the late 19th century. Dozens of young women crossed the Atlantic, not for love but for alliances. Railroad tycoons, steel barons, and financiersmen who built America's wealth but craved European titles. Their daughters became the bargaining chips. In exchange for fortune's millions, in dowries ancient English houses opened their doors to fresh money. But money could not buy warmth. Money could not buy love. These women often found themselves in cold marriages, crumbling estates, and rigid traditions that sought to erase every trace of their American identity. Would you do it? If you were given the chance to be called Duchess, to stand among queens and lords, would you trade your freedom for the crown? The glitter of tiaras at royal balls was dazzling, but behind it lay the loneliness of massive, empty dining halls. The reality of being ornamental in a world built on men's names and men's rules. Charlotte Miller, daughter of railroad magnate Jonathan Miller, had grown up in a Manhattan mansion filled with laughter, sunlight, and warmth. There had always been music, always been people. Her mother loved hosting dinners, her brothers filled the halls with jokes, and Charlotte herself had been the golden child, envied, spoiled, yet free. But here, in England, she was no longer Charlotte Miller. She was the Duchess of Harrington, wife to Edward Harrington, a man she barely knew as she stepped out of bed. Her silk nightgown brushed against the icy floor, her breath fogging in the air. The room, grand and ornate, with carved oak and velvet curtains, felt more like a museum than a place of comfort. She moved to the mirror. For a moment, she saw herself, the same Charlotte, the same brown eyes, the same restless curiosity. But then she noticed it, the foreign setting swallowing her reflection. She looked smaller, diminished, as though her image was being rewritten to fit a script she had not chosen. The girl I was yesterday, she thought, is gone. In her place stands a duchess I do not recognize. Charlotte recalled her father's words on the day of her wedding. This marriage will secure your future, Charlotte. The Harringtons are old blood. You'll be a duchess. But as she looked around, she asked herself, whose future was secured mine, or his. Her dowry had paid off debts, restored lands, and saved a title from crumbling. But her heart, no one had asked about that. What would you choose? Love without title, or title without love? Charlotte hugged herself against the cold. But the truth was, it wasn't just the air. It was the weight pressing down on her, the weight of history, of tradition, of invisible eyes demanding she play a role she did not understand. The door creaked open. A maid entered without knocking, carrying a tray of tea. She did not meet Charlotte's eyes. "Your Grace," she muttered, setting the tray down. The words stunk not because of respect, but because of distance. Your Grace was a title that reduced Charlotte to position, not person. The maid glanced at Charlotte's silk nightgown from New York and whispered, "Unsuitable," already marking it for removal. Charlotte opened her mouth to protest, but stopped. The maid did not ask, she simply informed. Later, Charlotte learned her entire wardrobe from America would be sent away. Dresses chosen by her mother, gowns she wore at New York balls, all replaced by stiff, high-necked buttoned dresses demanded by English etiquette. Lady Harwick, her relentless etiquette instructor, would retrain her into a proper duchess. It was then Charlotte felt the first pang of humiliation. Her thoughts whispered, "In America, I was Charlotte Miller. Here, I am not even myself. I am property." But this was only the beginning. Charlotte did not yet know the storms ahead: a husband who would treat her as a bank account, servants who would whisper behind her back, a mistress who would steal her joy. And yet, in the shadows, a sisterhood waited. Women like her, bought and sold, yet not entirely powerless. Would she survive? Would she bend beneath the crown or rise against it? Charlotte stood at her window, staring at the fog-drenched London skyline. Her hands gripped the windowsill, her breath shuddering as the gas lamps flickered in the streets below. And she whispered, "This is my life now, but it will not break me." The sea has a way of swallowing goodbyes. It was New York Harbor, 1895, steamships looming against the skyline, black smoke rising from tall stacks, families clustered at the piers, their words lost in the roar of gulls and the hiss of steam. Charlotte Miller stood on the gangway of the SS Majestic, clutching her gloves so tightly the seams bit into her palms. Behind her, her father shook Edward Harrington's hand, businessman sealing a deal. Ahead of her, the vast Atlantic yawned, endless and grey. Her mother dabbed her eyes with a lace handkerchief and whispered, "Be brave, my darling. A duchess does not falter." The ship's whistle screamed, the ropes were loosed, and the deck shuddered beneath Charlotte's feet as the vessel pulled away from the pier. The skyline of New York blurred with distance, and the life she knew faded into mist. Would you have stepped forward or run back into the crowd? The days aboard the SS Majestic were long, restless, and strange. Charlotte discovered seasickness, an enemy she had never imagined, in New York's still parlors. Her maid hovered with smelling salts, but nothing cured the rolling nausea of the sea. At dinner, the dining saloon was crowded with aristocrats returning to England, merchants, and fellow American brides to be. The air hummed with accent-strolling Americans, clipped Englishmen, the soft Irish lilt of stewards. Whispers floated down the tables. "Another dollar, princess." Charlotte lifted her chin, but the words stung. One woman, older and shabbied, leaned close and whispered a warning, "Be careful, my dear. Titles cost more than money." Imagine being 20 years old, surrounded by strangers, the sea endless. On every side, and every whisper reminding you that you are not a bride of love, but of commerce. Would you have smiled politely or cried yourself to sleep? Nights stretched on, the cabin creaking with the groan of waves. Charlotte dreamed of New York, her mother's laughter, her brothers racing up staircases, and woke with tears. But, as the voyage neared its end, something inside her shifted. She steeled herself. If she was to be a duchess, then she would learn to be iron. I always read the comments, and it's wild to see stories like this connect people from every corner of the globe. The morning the ship neared Liverpool, the deck thrummed with anticipation. Fog hung heavy over the grey water as the coastline emerged, slowly cliffs, chimneys, and the skeletal outlines of industrial docks. Charlotte clutched the rail. This was not the golden welcome she had imagined. It was grim, soot-stained, and cold. Workers in caps swarmed the docks, the air thick with coal smoke. London awaited, but already Charlotte felt the weight of another world pressing down. If your new life began in smoke and shadow, would you see it as a warning or a challenge? From Liverpool, Charlotte boarded a private train carriage reserved for the Harringtons. The velvet seats and polished brass could not mask the gloom pressing through the windows. Fields stretched endlessly green, but damp and bleak beneath grey skies. Cottages of stone crouched along the tracks, smoke from factories smearing the horizon. Across from her sat Edward Harrington, Duke of Harrington, her husband. He was tall, composed, impeccably dressed in tailored tweed. But his eyes were cool, appraising her not as a bride, but as a transaction completed. "London is not New York," he said flatly, as if she needed reminding. "There are standards." Charlotte swallowed, lowering her gaze, though inside her mind was a storm. "He does not see me. He sees the check my father signed." The carriage rattled through London, past gas lamps, hansom cabs, and throngs of people in dark coats. The city was alive yet sombre, a maze of narrow streets choked by smoke. Finally, they arrived at Harrington House. The mansion loomed like a fortress, its Gothic facade rising in stone towers, its windows tall and unwelcoming. Inside, the air was colder than the street. Servants lined the hall, their eyes downcast, their silence heavy. Edward strode ahead, not glancing back to see if Charlotte followed. She paused in the entry hall, where the portraits stared oil-painted dukes in powdered wigs, duchesses with narrowed eyes, generations of Harringtons watching, judging. Her footsteps echoed on the marble. Each step felt like a nail ceiling. A coffin. She was introduced to Lady Harwick, her etiquette instructor, a thin woman with a face as sharp as her tone. She curtsied stiffly. "We will begin at once. Your posture, your speech, your manners all must be corrected." Charlotte forced a smile, though her heart pounded. Corrected, as if she were broken, later. As she explored her rooms, Charlotte noticed the subtle distance in every servant's glance. Not warmth, not respect, simply duty. She was not their mistress. She was an intruder. That night, Charlotte sat across from Edward at the vast dining table. 60 chairs, and only 2 were occupied. The silence was unbearable. Edward spoke little, only of estate matters, horses, tenants, debts. He did not ask about her. He did not ask about America. When Charlotte tried to fill the silence with a story from New York, he interrupted. "The past is behind you now. You must learn your place here." Her cheeks burned as she lowered her eyes, realizing with dread that this was not marriage. It was ownership. Would you endure? Would you fight to reclaim yourself? That night, Charlotte lay awake in her grand, cold bed. The house creaked. The wind moaned against the windows. She remembered New York warmth, laughter, light. Tears came, but she forced them back. She could not let this place see her break. Charlotte Miller had crossed the sea to become a duchess, but beneath the crown of Harrington House lay chains she had yet to see, and chains are meant to be tested. The next day began not with sunlight, but with discipline. The bells of Harrington House chimed 6 o'clock. A maid pulled open the curtains. The fog outside was so thick that even the sun seemed afraid to show itself. Charlotte sat up in bed, her body still weary from the voyage, but the maid did not ask if she was tired. A tray of weak tea and bread was placed before her. No warmth, no conversation, only function. Moments later, Lady Harwick entered thin, severe, dressed in black silk that whispered with each step. Her eyes swept Charlotte. Like a blade, up, she commanded. A duchess must never slouch in bed. Charlotte obeyed, though her body ached. The training had begun. Lady Harwick ordered Charlotte's American wardrobe removed. Dresses of soft silks, pastel colors, and daring necklines vanished into trunks to be shipped away. In their place came stiff high-necked gowns, layers of fabric that suffocated more than they warmed, shoes with narrow tips that pinched, corsets so tight Charlotte gasped for breath. She protested once. "These are not mine," but Lady Harwick interrupted coldly. "Nothing here is yours, Duchess. You belong to England now. You belong to the Harringtons. You belong to your husband." Charlotte felt her throat close. Her reflection in the mirror stared back at her, now dressed not as herself, but as a stranger. How much of yourself would you surrender if every thread of your past was stripped away? The lessons were brutal. Charlotte was forced to walk with a book balanced on her head for hours, shoulders pulled back until her muscles burned. She was not allowed to lean, not allowed to stumble. Every misstep earned a sharp rap of Lady Harwick's cane against the floor. At dinner practice, she was made to use silverware in exact order, never lifting her elbows. She had to speak in clipped tones, never laugh too loudly, never interrupt. When she slipped, Lady Harwick snapped, "You are not in New York anymore. Girl, here. One mistake ruins a reputation." Charlotte's back ached, but her pride ached more. Her accent was corrected next. Lady Harwick made her repeat phrases for hours, forcing her to mimic the cold precision of English speech. Water became water H. Schedule became schedule. "Your voice betrays you," Harwick said. "Every word must be erased of its vulgar American sound." Charlotte bit her tongue until she tasted blood. At night, she whispered into her pillow in her old accent, terrified that if she stopped, she would forget herself completely. Have you ever feared losing your voice literally because someone decided it was wrong? Her first dinner among English guests was a disaster. She curtsied too low, losing her balance as laughter rippled around the table. She tried to share a light-hearted story from her childhood, but Edward cut her off. Americans are so fond of speaking. The room chuckled, and Charlotte's cheeks burned crimson. She lowered her eyes and said nothing more. Later that night, she stared into the mirror. The Duchess, looking back, was flawless, hair pinned high, dress immaculate, posture regal, but Charlotte knew it was only a mask. "Is this me?" she whispered. The mirror gave no answer. Days blurred into lessons, rules, and endless corrections. Charlotte wrote letters to her mother, but tore them up before sending, afraid Edward might read them. One evening, Lady Harwick forced her to walk the great hall for an hour with books stacked on her head. Her corset tightened until her ribs screamed. Charlotte stumbled. The books crashed to the floor. Lady Harwick's voice cut the air. "You are a duchess, not a child. Do you want to shame us all before Her Majesty herself?" Charlotte's chest heaved, her vision blurred, and she collapsed to her knees, gasping for breath. In that moment, she realized the truth. Harrington House was not teaching her, it was breaking her. Later, alone, Charlotte stood before the mirror again. The face staring back was pale, lips pressed tight, eyes dulled. She did not recognize the woman she saw. Her hands gripped the dressing table until her knuckles whitened. "Charlotte Miller," she whispered fiercely, as though saying her own name might keep her alive, but even her name felt foreign now. What happens when your reflection no longer belongs to you, when even the glass insists you are someone else? That night, Charlotte lay awake in her suffocating bed, gas lamps flickering. In the hallway outside, she heard Edward's footsteps pass her door, steady, heavy, indifferent. He did not come in. He did not ask if she was well. The ceiling loomed above her like a stone lid, and she thought, if I do not fight for myself soon, there will be nothing left of me to save. Charlotte Miller was disappearing, but in the ashes of her erased self, something new was waiting to be born. The morning table stretched like a road-white linen, silver glinting, a vase of hothouse roses that smelled faintly of a summer Charlotte could not reach. At one end, a boiled egg in a porcelain cup cooled untouched. At the other, Edward read a letter with the solemnity of a priest. Charlotte sat upright, hands folded, etiquette drills burned into muscle memory. She watched steam curl from the teapot like a spirit escaping. "Your sleep?" she asked carefully. "Adequate," Edward replied, without looking up. Silence settled, heavy as the drapes. He signed the letter Harrington in a clean, confident hand and finally raised his eyes. "You'll receive the Marchioness of Claremont this afternoon. Don't ask questions. Agree to her every suggestion. She holds influence where it matters." "Where?" Charlotte asked, curiosity breaking through. "Everywhere," he said, flatly, already finished with the conversation. "And remember, you represent stability, a wife as a seal, a duchess as a signature in silk. What would you say if your marriage was a ledger and you were ink?" Servants moved like clockwork, silent, efficient, unseen unless needed. Charlotte learned their routes by sound: the coal scuttle on the back stairs, the tea trolley's soft rattle, the nervous footsteps of a hall maid who never met her eyes. Her own footsteps were always loud. That night she was escorted to her. Bedroom green silk walls, a fireplace that flinched at the damp, a bed large enough to drown in, down a corridor, behind another door, his room. The marriage, like the house, was adjoining yet apart. She stood in the doorway for a long time, waiting for a knock that never came. At last, the corridor's gaslight sputtered and died, along with the small hope she could not name. In America, she thought, we ate together, laughed together. Here, even the evenings are partitioned. If your love life were arranged like furniture, close, but never touching, how long before the dust settled on your heart? Harrington House hosted 12 at dinner, a blaze of jewels, a low hum of pedigrees. Charlotte's dress was correct, her smile subtle, her posture an architecture of effort. The air tasted of consomme, pheasant, and unspoken rules. She experimented with a story gentle, charming about a skating pond in Central Park and a red scarf lost to the wind. Edward interrupted without looking at her. New York anecdotes are diverting in New York. A polite giggle travelled around the table like a ripple. The Marchioness of Claremont tilted her head. "Quite right," Harrington. Our American friends do take up such cheerful space. Charlotte swallowed a mouthful of fire, masquerading as wine. She placed her utensils with precision, just as Lady Harwick taught. Smile, breathe, disappear gracefully. Have you ever learned the art of vanishing at a table full of people? Morning brought papers. A steward presented estate ledgers for Charlotte's awareness. Not permission, only awareness. Edward explained without warmth. You'll sign as witness where indicated. The tenants require reassurance. Appearances are everything. She scanned the columns' rents, collected, repairs deferred, a roof patched too cheaply, coal stores. Lo, then came the oddities. Invoices paid to a milliner on Bond Street not listed among household vendors. A regular debt at White's a Gentleman's Club she had never seen. What is this? She asked, tapping the page. A husband's affairs, he answered, tone final. You will keep your eyes on what concerns you. Does nothing concern me, then? She thought, but she set down the pen. The signature line waited. The pen was heavier than it should be. One afternoon, Charlotte paused at the service corridor, unseen by the footmen gathered in their quiet island. Their conversation was hushed, but clear enough for anyone listening. Anyone ever listened to servants? Her Grace asked for coffee at 11, one said. Said she prefers it stronger. Americans always do, another chuckled. But His Grace has tea at 10:30, so she adjust. She's not likely to last, the first replied, and the corridor answered with a small, dangerous silence. They never do. Charlotte stepped back, heat rising in her throat, nearly spilling her own teacup. She was a duchess, but the house had adjudicated her already. When a place decides who you are, before you've spoken, how loud must you become to be heard? It rained and rained and rained, the famous English variety that seeped into walls and moods. Charlotte walked the portrait gallery to stay awake, to keep from sinking. Ancestors in oil stared down with bored cruelty. She tested them. Was she happy? She asked a powdered duchess whose pearls were too tight. Did you love him? She asked a red-coated lord with calm, dead eyes. The portraits kept their counsel, though the house itself seemed to whisper duty, title, continuity. The words slithered into her bones like chill. One evening she wrote to her mother in a burst ink, scratching fast, breath held. Dearest Mama, the house is beautiful and very cold. I feel I am rehearsing a role without a script. Edward is. She stopped. The page stared back, daring her. She ripped it in two, then into four, then into silence. The fire accepted the pages without flame, as if even the coal disapproved of American emotion. If I cannot tell the truth to paper, she thought, to whom can I tell it? Edward took her to a parish event, a performance of mercy. Charlotte's gloved hands distributed baskets with measured smiles. The vicar thanked her for her generosity, which was her father's money. Children with soot-dark faces peeked at her from behind skirts. A woman with raw hands curtsied, grateful. Charlotte felt a split shame and pride in equal measure. She wanted to do more than perform giving. She wanted to be it. But the Marchioness of Claremont appeared, the scent of violets preceding her like a flag. Don't encourage expectations, the Marchioness purred. Philanthropy is theatre, not policy. Charlotte's spine shook, but her posture held quick thought. If you were Charlotte, would you play along to survive, or break the rules and risk scandal to do real good? Comment play if you would conform for now, or break if you would defy. The script, rumour travelled like perfume soft at first, then choking. Charlotte heard it in a drifting sentence, an intercepted glance. A mistress, not named, never named. In a world where names mattered more than breath, the omission was its own declaration. She kept her face arranged in polite interest while her chest tightened. At dinner, Edward mentioned a fitting knot, hers. A glance passed between him and a man whose smile lived in clubs. White's again, Bond Street again. If jealousy was a fever, this one burned cold. She could survive anger. It was the ice of irrelevance that terrified her. Would you rather be hated or ignored? An invitation arrived for a country meet. Edward accepted for them both. Harrington colours were prepared. The boots Lady Harwick ordered for Charlotte were beautifully cut and brutally unyielding. The morning was wet and glittering. Horses snorted steam. Men laughed in that comfortable way of those who inherited laughter. Charlotte rode well, she always had, but here skill was courtesy, not currency. At a pause near a hedgerow, she overheard two ladies through the veil of their admiration. She does sit well, one conceded. Practice makes perfect, the other replied. The implication as sharp as a thorn. Charlotte smiled at them with exquisite serenity and took the next hedge a fraction higher than necessary. It earned a small gasp in V, she hoped, or fear. She would take either over dismissal. Back at Harrington House, Charlotte asked the steward Pyatt, sweet as sugar, for another look at the household books. He hesitated, then yielded. The figures spread before her again, columns like corridors. There were regular payments too. Maison Etoile, a Parisian couturier. They were not listed under her wardrobe account, but they were enough to clothe the chorus. And there was a private drawer expense at White's, monthly, steady as sunrise, far too large for tips and brandy. She circled the entries in her mind but left no ink on the page yet. Is there a problem, Your Grace? The steward asked, his eyes careful. Not at all, she said, matching his care. Only admiration for your thoroughness. The house learned from its masters. So would she night again. A draught prowled, the corridor like a stray memory. Charlotte stood at her window, palms pressed against the icy glass, watching fog erase the city's edges. She imagined New York lights bright, brash, refusing to be swallowed. She imagined her brothers teasing her, her mother humming, the silver bells of sleighs in winter instead of this endless wet whisper. She did not cry. She had learned that tears were a luxury in places where one's face was always on display. Instead, she made a promise to the woman in the glass, to the girl in New York, to the Duchess in the portrait who would not answer her. I will not be your cautionary tale. If this is a performance, then I will master the stage. Returning from the gallery, she passed Edward's study. The door was almost closed. Voices leaked through the crack. The last tranche already transferred, a man said. Maison Etoile has sent the accounts. Edward's voice was smooth, detached. See that they're kept off the household ledgers, and settle the matter at White's. My credit is useful and must remain so. From the American dowry reserve, the man asked. A paper shifted. The fire cracked. From where else? Edward replied. A pause, and Her Grace. Her Grace enjoys the privileges of her station, Edward said, and a chair scraped as if he had stood. She need not be troubled by arithmetic. Charlotte backed away, the words like cold iron on her tongue. Not troubled by arithmetic. Not trusted with her own arithmetic. If someone gambled with your future behind a half-closed door, would you knock or memorize every number and wait? That night, she sat opposite him again. The silver was bright enough to blind. She spread butter with surgical precision, exactly as Lady Harwick had taught, and asked in a voice as mild as milk, "Did you enjoy your day at White's?" There was a pause, infinitesimal, then a smile that was not a smile. "I accomplished what needed doing, and Bond Street." She pressed, steady, unblinking. "London is full of necessities," he replied, returning to his meat. "You will find that out." She sipped her wine. It would taste like defeat only if she allowed it to. She would not. Very well, she told herself. If we are being polite, then let our politeness be war. Later, alone in her room, she pulled a sheet from her writing desk ream, thick, expensive, and drew no words. Only columns: income, outflow, reserve, discrepancies. She began to reconstruct. The numbers from memory, a ledger of ghosts, Maisonette oil, Whites, other names that did not belong to her, but fed on what should have been hers. Halfway down the page, the figures broke like a wave against stone, leaving only a shoreline of lack. She stared at the abyss between what she had carried across the sea and what remained. The house clock struck, somewhere in the distance. A door closed softly, the sound of someone skilled at secrecy. Charlotte folded the blank ledger page and slipped it into a book. No one in Harrington House would dare touch an American novel dismissed as frivolous. She blew out the lamp. Not troubled by arithmetic, she whispered into the dark, "We'll see." The music dipped into a low, waiting chord. The image lingered on the closed study door down the corridor, the sliver of light beneath it now gone. It began with a folded note slipped beneath her plate at breakfast. No seal, no name, just a single line written in neat American script: Thursday, 4 o'clock. The blue salon at Claridge's. Charlotte froze. The handwriting was not Edward's. It was not Lady Harwick's. It felt almost familiar, like a lifeline in ink. She glanced at Edward, absorbed in a letter about tenant disputes. His indifference gave her cover. Quietly, she tucked the note into her sleeve. If you found a secret message in a house where even mirrors seemed to spy, would you go? London's. Claridge's hotel gleamed with gilt and velvet, a palace for travellers and exiles alike. Charlotte entered beneath its glass canopy under the guise of shopping with her maid. Her heart pounded against her ribs as she followed the instructions. The blue salon was quiet, curtained, perfumed faintly with lavender. A circle of women sat in brocade chairs, and they turned as one when Charlotte stepped inside. Americans. She knew it instantly. Their laughter carried differently brighter, less rehearsed. Their gowns had whispers of colour where English black and grey dominated. One rose, tall, auburn-haired, with a smile that felt like sunlight after rain. "Mrs. Harrington," she said softly, "welcome to the sisterhood." They called themselves the Dollar Duchesses. Some were duchesses, some marchionesses, some countesses, but all were American heiresses, bought with dowries and sold into titles. Over tea, they traded stories like smuggled goods. One spoke of a husband who hadn't shared her bed in 5 years. Another of estates crumbling even after her dowry vanished into repairs. A third of being publicly humiliated for an accent she could not erase. Their words were edged with bitterness, but also with survival. Charlotte listened, stunned. Everything she thought was hers, alone the coldness, the alienation, the mockery, was a pattern, repeated again and again. She was not a failure. She was part of a system. And how different does pain feel when you realize you are not the only one bleeding? They taught her their unwritten code. Never trust the servants with secrets they report upward. Keep a private account. Hide funds in jewelry, artworks, or American banks. Appear perfect in public, for scandal is ammunition. Ever give it away. Confide only here. In this circle, the truth is safe. One duchess placed a hand gently on Charlotte's arm. We are wives, yes, but we are also bankers, actresses, and spies in our own homes. That is how we survive. Charlotte swallowed, for the first time since. Arriving in England, she felt the stir of something like hope. As the conversation deepened, voices lowered. Wine replaced tea. The air thickened with candor. One woman confessed to redirecting part of her dowry into her children's names, hidden from her husband. Another hinted at paying off her husband's mistress in exchange for peace. Then the Auburn-head leader, Lady Margaret Astor herself, married to an earl drowning in debt, gave a grim warning. Control what you can, Charlotte. If not, you'll watch him spend your dowry on gambling, tables and Bond Street dresses. And when it's gone, so are you. Charlotte stiffened. The words struck too close. She thought of Edward's study, the receipts, the whispered accounts. The pieces fit together with terrifying clarity. If you were Charlotte, would you confront Edward nor wait, gathering weapons of truth? Before leaving, Lady Margaret slipped Charlotte a small book. Its spine was plain, its pages filled not with prayers, but with advice written by generations of American wives before her. Inside were the names of solicitors who could be trusted, instructions for discreetly opening accounts, and strategies for retaining inheritance across the Atlantic. It was contraband, more dangerous than dynamite within Harrington House. Guard this with your life, Margaret whispered. Some day it may guard you. Charlotte tucked it against her ribs, her pulse hammering. Back in the cold manor, everything looked the same: portraits glaring, servants averting their eyes, Edward speaking only in ledgers and decrees. Yet Charlotte no longer felt entirely alone in the cage. There were others. There was a network, and there were strategies. A spark stirred in her chest, faint but real. She whispered to her reflection in the dressing mirror, "They think I am powerless, but I am learning the rules of their game." That night, as she hid the little book inside a hollowed-out American novel, she heard Edward's voice through the corridor. Calm, commanding, dangerous, double quotes, ... The Marchioness expects results. The American dowry will not last forever. Charlotte froze, her fingers tightening on the secret book, and the question lingered in the dark. What happens when a duchess begins to keep her own secrets? And how long before the House of Harrington notices? The sound of voices drifted through Harrington House like smoke. Charlotte halted by a half-closed door. Double quotes, ... Another 20 sovereigns lost at White's, a steward murmured. And the milliner's account doubled this month. Charlotte pressed her hand to the wall, her breath quickening. The words were daggers. Edward's name wasn't spoken, but it didn't need to be. She knew. What would you do if you overheard your fortune bleeding away coin by coin? That evening, while Edward dined elsewhere, Charlotte stepped into his study. The air reeked faintly of brandy and cigar smoke. Papers lay scattered across the desk, a carelessness uncharacteristic of him. She opened a ledger. There it was, her dowry, recorded in precise ink, deposits, expenditures, dwindling reserves. Each page was a wound. Gambling debts disguised as social expenses, payments to Maison Edouard far too extravagant for household needs. Private loans taken against future income, secured by her fortune. Charlotte gripped the desk until her knuckles whitened. Her father's fortune, the foundation of her marriage, was being drained like a vein cut open. Then a letter slipped from the pile, faintly scented of roses, not hers. She read, "Dearest Edward, I adored the necklace. Do hurry to Bond Street. Again, as we must plan my gown for Lady Ashworth's ball. Your ever-devoted L." The signature curled like a whip. Charlotte's vision blurred. It wasn't just money. It was love, intimacy, attention all poured into another woman. Her stomach knotted. The humiliation burned worse than the betrayal. She had been not only a bank, but a shadow, financing a romance that was not hers. Would you rather be unloved or used? The next evening, Charlotte sat beside Edward at dinner. His smile was calm, his tone commanding. He spoke of horses, rents, and hunting. He clinked glasses with peers, laughed politely, charming as if nothing rotted beneath the surface. Charlotte sat rigid, fury bubbling under her practiced serenity. She heard the whispers of her fellow duchesses in her mind, appear perfect in public. Scandal is ammunition. So she smiled, she nodded, she played her role. But her eyes, when they met Edward's across the candlelight, no longer held innocence. They were learning calculation. Later that night, the confrontation came. The study again, firelight dancing on the walls. "I've seen the accounts," Charlotte said, her voice low. Edward didn't flinch. "Then you know the necessity of appearances." "Appearances," she snapped. "You gamble our future at White's, you dress your mistress in silks, and you call it appearances." Edward rose slowly, his shadow stretching across the room. "Do not mistake your position, Charlotte. You are here to ensure this house survives. That is all, nothing more." Her pulse hammered, but she did not look away. "I will not watch my dowry vanish into Bond Street." He smirked, almost amused. "And what will you do, Duchess? Count the coins yourself." That night, Charlotte could not sleep. She paced her room, the fire dying in the grate. His words echoed in her head. "What will you do?" Her fists clenched. She thought of Lady Margaret's book, the whispered advice of the dollar duchesses. She thought of her father's empire men, who built fortunes by refusing to be mocked. Would you endure insult after insult, or would you find a way to seize back control? Charlotte knelt by the hidden book, flipping to the pages about solicitors, trusts, and secret accounts. Her finger traced a name. Mr. Henry Dalton, solicitor of Gray's Inn Road, trusted, discreet, dangerous if discovered. Days passed. Charlotte played her party, tending teas, hosting dinners, smiling at Edward's side. But inside, she was planning. She began tucking away small coins from her allowance. She quietly inventoried her jewelry, calculating what could be liquidated if needed. She memorized names in ledgers, preparing questions for Dalton. For the first time, her reflection in the mirror did not look entirely powerless. There was a glint, a spark that had not been there before. Imagine being Charlotte, your husband, drains your fortune, dresses his mistress in your silks, and dares you to act. Do you storm into battle openly or plot in silence until the knife is sharp enough? Tell me in the comments. Would you choose patience or confrontation? Charlotte arranged her first secret errand. A carriage, ostensibly for shopping. A maid dismissed with a polite excuse. Instead of Bond Street, she directed the driver toward Gray's Inn. Her hands shook as she stepped into the solicitor's office, the air thick with ink and dust. "Mr. Dalton," she whispered, The man rose middle-aged, sharp-eyed, cautious. "You are her Grace." "Yes," she said. "And I need to know how much of my dowry can be protected from my husband." The room seemed to hold its breath. Dalton leaned forward, steepling his fingers. "It will not be easy. The law favors him, but there are avenues, risky, discreet. Once begun, there is no turning back." Charlotte's heart pounded. For the first time, she felt the line between duchess and prisoner blur into something. Elsa's strategist in disguise. She nodded once, then "Show me the first step." Charlotte Miller had been a pawn on Edward's board. But pawns, in time, can cross the chessboard and become queens. The rain had driven London's finest into the gallery, where portraits and gilt frames shimmered under gaslight. Charlotte, draped in emerald silk, forced her smile as ladies chattered of hats and invitations. Then Lord James Winters, tall, dark-haired, with the easy composure of someone born into privilege yet tempered by curiosity. Unlike Edward, his eyes met hers, not with ownership, but with recognition. "Your Grace," he bowed, voice low, "you look tired of being looked at." Charlotte startled. He had seen through her mask. She laughed softly, though every glance around them warned her. Such honesty was dangerous here. "Would you risk a conversation with the only man who saw you as a person, not a title?" They walked together slowly, as if admiring the paintings. His voice was careful, almost a whisper. "I knew your father by reputation, astute, ruthless. You have his eyes, I think." Charlotte bristled, but he added, "and his instinct to survive. You'll need it, Edward. Is not a steward of fortunes." Her pulse quickened. He knew. "How do you?" she began. "Everyone at White's knows," James interrupted. "Cards, horses, women. He spends what others have already lost. And your dowry," he stopped, weighing his words. "Forgive me, I've said too much." But Charlotte seized the moment. "No, say it please." His eyes met hers. "If you value your inheritance, Duchess, you'll seek allies who can protect it." That evening, Charlotte sat again in Dalton's cramped office, the gas lamps flickering. She carried with her the secret book from Lady Margaret, the hidden guide of the Dollar Duchesses. Dalton adjusted his spectacles. "Her ladyship warned you correctly. The law binds wives to their husbands. But there are shadows in the law." "Shadows," Charlotte whispered. "Separate trusts, American transfers, jewels hidden as heirlooms. If handled discreetly, you can secure what remains. But if discovered, he let the sentence hang." Charlotte gripped the arm of her chair. "Then we must be shadows too." Dalton outlined her options. Quietly transfer small sums into an account in her maiden name through intermediaries. Purchase jewels that could be resold abroad, recorded as gifts. Divert household funds into charitable donations that returned in hidden form. Every word was dangerous, every scheme a scandal if revealed. Charlotte nodded. "I will learn. Tell me everything." Would you dare break the very laws written to trap you, knowing discovery meant ruin? Days later, at a gathering in Mayfair, Lord James approached her again. His voice was casual for the crowd, but his eyes were sharp. "Be careful with Dalton," he murmured. "He is loyal, but loyalty is a coin often purchased twice. If you wish, I can introduce you to men who respect your position," quietly. Charlotte studied him. He was offering help, perhaps more. But his proximity was dangerous. Already, whispers followed them like shadows. She chose her words carefully. Perhaps one day, but not yet. He bowed slightly. As you wish, Duchess. When you are ready, I will be waiting. Pause for a moment. Charlotte now had to Alice Dalton, the cautious solicitor, and Lord James, the sympathetic noble. Who should she trust more? Would you choose Dalton, the man of law, or James, the peer who sees her heart? Charlotte began living in two worlds. By day, she was the perfect Duchess, attending teas, receiving guests, standing silent at Edward's side. By night, she pored over Dalton's documents, memorizing accounts, practicing signatures, calculating conversions into dollars and francs. The mirror no longer showed a girl erased. It showed a woman building two identities, the Duchess for society, the strategist in secret. But each new step deepened the risk. One evening, Edward entered her room unexpectedly. Charlotte quickly slid her notes beneath her embroidery frame. He glanced at her sharply. "You've been busy." "Practicing," she replied evenly, holding up the embroidery. His eyes lingered, suspicious. "You would do well to focus on appearances, Charlotte. A duchess has little business with ink and numbers." He left, but the echo of his words chilled. Her, he suspected. And what happens when the hunter notices the prey sharpening its claws? That night, Charlotte met Dalton again, urgency in her voice. "He is watching me. We must move faster." Dalton leaned forward, candlelight sharpening, his face. "Then it is time for the second step. We must transfer the first funds abroad. If Edward discovers us before it is done, everything will collapse." Charlotte's heart hammered. She nodded. "Then we begin." Her reflection lingered in Dalton's. Window 2, Charlotte staring back. One duchess bound by chains, one woman preparing to cut them. It began with a missing document. Charlotte had hidden one of Edward's receipts, an outrageous sum to Maison et Toillant, to study it later. But Edward noticed its absence. The storm broke in his study, the air thick with brandy and tobacco. "You presume too much," he growled, slamming the desk with his palm. "My affairs are mine. You are here to provide stability, not to question me." Charlotte's voice held steady despite the fear inside. "Your affairs are funded by my dowry. That makes them mine too. Would you stay silent under such thunder? Would you dare speak in lightning?" Edward rose, towering, his face flushed. "Do not test me, Charlotte. This house has stood for generations. You are but a guest, a passing figure in a long line." She stiffened. "No, Edward, I am not a guest. I am the reason your roof does not leak and your tenants are fed. Without me, Harrington House is ash and debt." His hand clenched around the glass of brandy until it shattered, amber spilling across the desk. The violence was not against her, but the air trembled with the threat. "You forget yourself," he hissed. Charlotte met his eyes, unblinking. "No, Edward, for the first time, I remember myself." The argument echoed through Harrington House. Servants froze in the corridors, ears straining though they pretended not to hear. The ancestral portraits seemed almost alive, watching the duel of wills. This was not merely husband and wife. Was America's brash new wealth clashing against England's crumbling, unyielding tradition? Charlotte felt the weight of it, but refused to bend. Edward paced like a predator, but Charlotte held her ground. "You risk scandal," he warned. "A duchess whispering of accounts, sneaking into offices, it is unbecoming." Charlotte answered sharply, "What is unbecoming is a duke who drains his wife's fortune to dress another woman." His face paled, then darkened. "You've been spying "I've been surviving," she replied. Silence thickened. 2 armies, 1 room. At last, Edward spoke with icy precision. "You will cease this nonsense. No more ledgers. No more meddling. Or I will see to it that you are locked out of every account, every decision. You will live as a duchess in name. Only ornament, nothing more." Charlotte's hands trembled, but her voice was iron. "Try, Edward, try, and I will go to the Queen herself. Do you think she admires dukes who squander American alliances? Do you think she does not know what sustains her empire now?" His eyes widened. She had struck where it hurt most, his reputation. Imagine standing across from Edward, the man who owns your title but spends your fortune. Would you stay silent to preserve peace, or speak boldly and risk everything? Comment silent if you would endure, or bold if you would fight. Edward poured himself another drink, his hands less steady now. He studied her with something unfamiliar, not respect, but caution. "You want boundaries," he said at last. "Very well. The accounts for your personal allowance, your jewelry, and your charities shall be yours alone. The estates remain. Mine." Charlotte exhaled slowly. A partial victory, but a victory nonetheless. "And the debts," she pressed. His jaw tightened. "Mine to manage." She knew he lied, but she also knew she had forced him to the table, alone in her chamber later. Charlotte collapsed into a chair. Tears spilled not of weakness, but of release. For the first time, she had spoken not as a pawn, but as a player. The mirror showed a new face, weary but resolute. Every revolution begins with one refusal to bow. That night, Edward passed her door. He paused, his voice low through the wood. "You are clever, Charlotte, too clever. Be careful. Cleverness in women is rarely forgiven." His footsteps faded. Charlotte shivered, but her fists clenched. "Let them forgive or not. I will not vanish." The next morning, Dalton delivered news. "The first transfer succeeded," he told her. "A small sum, safe in America, but Edward will notice the missing threads soon." Charlotte nodded, her heart racing. Edward had yielded ground. She had drawn first blood. But the war was only beginning. Harrington House stood against the storm, rain lashing its stone walls, as the truth settled in. A truce was not peace. It was only the silence between battles, and Charlotte had only just learned how to fight. Lady Harwick drilled Charlotte harder than ever. "Your curtsy must be exact. Not too low, not too shallow. Do not speak until spoken to, and whatever you do, do not stumble." Charlotte practiced until her legs ached, her corset bruised her. Ribs, every motion rehearsed, every smile polished. Her reflection showed not a woman, but a puppet perfected. She whispered to herself, "They will not see me tremble." If your worth depended on a single bow before a queen, how steady would your knees be? Buckingham Palace gleamed under chandeliers. Charlotte waited in line, jewels heavy on her neck, her heart heavier still. The chamber hushed as her name was announced. Her Grace, the Duchess of Harrington. Gasps rippled, some admiring, some skeptical. She stepped forward. The Queen, small yet formidable, peered at her through shrewd eyes. Time froze. Charlotte lowered herself into the curtsy she had practiced 100 times. Her knees held. Her head bowed just right. The Queen studied her, then nodded. "America breeds strong stock," she murmured. Approval, a single phrase, but enough to silence doubters. Charlotte exhaled quietly. She had passed her trial. The weeks that followed were a blur of society balls and dinners, chandeliers, shampoo, orchestra's endless glitter. Charlotte wore her masks well. She laughed on cue, smiled at whispers, never faltered in posture. But beneath the performance, her heart ached. Every compliment felt like a chain. Every dance was a transaction. At one ball, she overheard a lady murmur, "Pretty enough for an American." Charlotte smiled wider, though inside she felt the sting. What would you do? Correct them, or let your silence become your revenge? At an opera night, Lord James appeared at her side. "You looked calm before the Queen," he murmured, "but your hands were shaking." Charlotte glanced at him sharply. "Did anyone else notice?" "No," he said softly, "only me." Their eyes met. For a moment, Charlotte felt the weight of being seen not as a duchess, not as a performance, but as herself, dangerous, thrilling. But not everyone is charmed. Whispers begin to circulate. Her accent is softened, but not gone. Her gown's too bold, marked by American taste, and Edward's distance, a shadow that says more than words ever could. Every syllable has the power to ruin her standing. Yet Charlotte remembers Lady Margaret's warning: appear perfect in public, so she plays the game, hosting teas, complimenting rivals, even feigning admiration for those who sneer at her. And slowly the whispers change from ridicule to fascination. Charlotte has learned the truth. Society is theatre, and survival demands performance. If you were in her place, what would you do? Would you play the part flawlessly to win their respect? Or would you defy them, risking scandal? Comment actress if you'd wear the mask, or rebel if you'd let your true self show. Asterisk at another gathering, Charlotte feels the weight of a gaze. The Queen herself watches from across the room. Then just the faintest nod, almost approving, and in an instant the air shifts. Whispers spread like wildfire. No longer is she simply the American Duchess. Now she is the Duchess admired by the Queen. The legitimacy she craved is finally hers. Yet inside she feels hollow. Every smile, every laugh, every gesture, none of it her own. That night, alone in her room, she removes her jewels one by one, until she stands bare before the mirror. The silence is deafening, and in a whisper she asks, "They saw a duchess, but who saw Charlotte?" Her reflection offers no reply. Mourning brings no comfort. A letter arrives at Wood's handwriting. "Your performance pleases society. Continue it. Our standing improves. Cold, detached. Transactional." Charlotte crumples the page, fury burning in her veins. She has won society's respect, yet in Edward's eyes she remains only an instrument. And so the chapter closes with a chilling truth: legitimacy has been won. But at what cost? When performance becomes survival, how long before the role devours the player? Asterisk carriages roll past in Hyde Park, wheels crunching gravel, horses tossing their heads beneath the late afternoon sun. Charlotte walks beside Lord James Winters, their pace measured, their distance corrects public propriety on full display. But beneath the surface, their conversation hums with what is unsaid. "You carry yourself differently," James observes, glancing sideways, as though the crown weighs less now. Charlotte's smile flickers faintly. "Perhaps I've grown stronger." Or perhaps, he answers softly, "You're learning how to lift it without breaking." Her heart stirs. His words are dangerous truthful in ways no one else dares to be. And the narrator whispers, if someone saw through every mask you wore, would you run from them or cling to them? They pause by the serpentine lake, where the water glimmers against the setting sun. James lowers his voice. I leave for Paris next month. A delegation, nothing formal, but you. You would find Paris kinder than London, less suffocating, more forgiving. Charlotte's breath stills. This isn't merely an invitation. It's an escape. For a heartbeat, she dares to imagine it boarding a train, vanishing into a city where no one calls her Your Grace. Paris streets alive with laughter, cafes, art, freedom. Her lips part. You tempt me, my lord. His eyes soften, then be tempted. But that evening, Harrington House greets her like a prison. Over dinner, Edward drones of estate debts, his voice detached, cold, as though she were a ledger to be balanced. Charlotte nods, polite, composed, but inside her mind drifts to Paris, its colors, its laughter, James's eyes. Later, in her room, she lingers before the mirror. Who am I that I dream of escape with another man? A coward ... or a woman still alive? The mirror offers no judgment, only the echo of her longing. The carriages roll past, wheels crunching over gravel, horses tossing their heads. Hyde Park glimmers in the late afternoon sun as Charlotte walks beside Lord James Winters. Their pace measured, their distance correct, public propriety on full display. Yet beneath the surface, their conversation hums with what is unsaid. James glances sideways, his voice steady but weighted. You carry yourself differently, as though the crown weighs less now. Charlotte's lips curve faintly. Perhaps I've grown stronger. Or perhaps, he answers softly, you're learning how to lift it without breaking. Her heart stirs at his words. They are dangerous, truthful, in ways no one else dares to be. And in that moment the question lingers, whispered like a secret. If someone saw through every mask you wore, would you run from them or cling to them? Later, by the edge of the serpentine lake, James lowers his voice. I leave for Paris next month, a delegation, nothing formal, but you. You would find Paris kinder than London, less suffocating, more forgiving. Charlotte's breath stills. This is no mere invitation. It is an offering of escape. The world tilts as she imagines it boarding a train, vanishing into a city where no one calls her Your Grace. Paris alive with laughter, with cafes and art, with freedom. For a heartbeat, she dares to believe. You tempt me, my lord, she whispers, his eyes soften, carrying a weight of both hope and danger. Then be tempted. But that evening, Harrington House feels colder than ever. Edward speaks of estate debts over dinner, his voice detached, as though she were nothing but a ledger. Charlotte nods politely, but her mind drifts to Paris, its colors, its laughter, James's eyes. In her room she stares at her reflection, whispering to the silence, who am I that I dream of escape with another man? A coward or a woman, still alive. The mirror offers no judgment, only the echo of her longing. 2 days later, a note arrives, unmarked, discreet. If you wish it, Claridge's, Tuesday evening. We will speak freely. Her fingers tremble as she folds the slip of paper and hides it in a book just before Edward enters the room. And the narrator asks, in a voice sharpened with temptation, would you go, knowing one meeting could change everything or destroy everything? On Tuesday evening, Charlotte enters the blue salon of Claridge's, veiled, her heart hammering. James rises at once, bowing. You came, he breathes, relief in his voice. Should I not have? She replies cautiously. Perhaps not, but I'm glad you did. They speak in quiet tones, every glance around them a reminder of risk. James tells her of Paris of opportunities, of lives reborn beyond the suffocating web of aristocracy. At last his voice drops lower, urgent yet tender. Charlotte, you deserve more than duty, more than silence. You deserve joy. Her chest aches at the sound of the word. Joy, a word she has not tasted in months. Their hands brush on the table, and a jolt runs through her. James leans closer, whispering, "Say it. Say you wish to leave." Her lips part, but no words come. Images flood her mind. Her father's pride, Lady Margaret's warning, the dollar duchesses depending on her, the fragile truce with Edward. To leave is to abandon the battle, to become a scandal, a whisper, nothing more. She withdraws her hand. Trembling, I cannot. Pain flickers in James's eyes, though he nods with quiet resignation. Then I will not ask again. But no, this sigh would have chosen you. Her heart shatters beneath the weight of that finality, and now the narrator turns to you. Imagine you are Charlotte, offered Paris, offered freedom, offered a man who sees you as you are. Would you take it? Comment escape if you'd leave everything behind, or stay if you'd endure duty and fight in silence. At Lady Ashworth's ball, Charlotte dances once with Lord James. Their hands barely touch. Their eyes never linger too long, but in those fleeting moments an entire world passes between them. As the music fades, James whispers, "Goodbye, Duchess." "Goodbye," she answers, her voice steady, though her heart is breaking. And as he bows and walks away, she feels both bereft and strangely stronger. Temptation has been faced and temptation refused. That night, Harrington House looms, as always, cold, heavy, judgmental. But Charlotte steps inside with something different in her eyes. She has made her choice. The path of escape, the dream of Paris, it is gone. She has chosen her battlefield, and it is here, in the quiet of her chamber. She opens Dalton's hidden book, her fingers steady. A vow forms in the silence. If freedom is denied me, then power must replace it. Her reflection stares back from the mirror. The jewels are gone, the mask set aside, but her resolve burns brighter than ever. She whispers into the stillness, "James offered me joy. Edward offers me chains. But I will build something else. My own empire, even if it is hidden in shadows." The camera lingers on her reflection. A faint smile curves her lips, not of happiness, but of something sharper. Determination, and the narrator closes the chapter with a chilling truth. Freedom tempted her, but duty chained her. And now, Charlotte Harrington would learn to turn her chains into weapons. It begins with a glance. At Lady Ashworth's luncheon, two women lean in, voices sharp as needles. Their whispers pierce through the air like smoke curling around. Charlotte Harrington's chair. The Duke spends more time at White's than at Harrington House, and more money on his milliner than on his wife. Charlotte keeps her smile fixed, porcelain and perfect, but her fingers tighten around the fragile teacup. And the question rises like a blade. Would you flinch? Or would you smile wider, knowing society's daggers are aimed at your back? Days later, the whispers find ink. A London paper carries an anonymous sting. The Duke of H. seen again at Bond Street, escorting a lady, not his Duchess. What debt, one wonders, is being paid this time? Edward storms through Harrington House, fury in his eyes, the crumpled paper in his fist. Lies, he roars, filth, printed by cowards. But Charlotte meets rage with stillness. Her words cut quieter, sharper. Then why does it feel true? His glare could shatter glass, yet still he offers no answer. The scandal grows legs. At dinners, in clubs, Edward's name falters beneath smirks and sideways glances. But society never leaves its appetite unsatisfied. Soon, the gaze shifts, and the Duchess, a whisper at a ball. So composed, too composed. Another voice adds, with venom wrapped in charm, and Lord James Winters has been at her side more than once. Americans are freer with their affections, aren't they? Charlotte's blood chills. What began as Edward's shame now bleeds onto her name. At another gathering, the tension coils tighter. As Charlotte exchanges polite words with Lord James, the room bristles, fans flutter. Brows lift, chuckles ripple through the crowd. The powder room offers no escape. A woman leans in, voice low, heavy with insinuation. Careful, Duchess. You wouldn't want to give people reason to believe the gossip. Charlotte smiles, a mask of poise. People will always believe what entertains them most, but behind the mask, her heart pounds, knowing the storm is no longer just his, it is hers. It begins with a glance. At Lady Ashworth's luncheon, whispers slither like smoke across porcelain cups. Two women lean in, voices sharp as daggers. The Duke spends more time at White's than at Harrington House, more money on his mill than his wife. Charlotte keeps her smile steady, but her hands tighten around the teacup. Would you flinch? Or would you smile wider, knowing society's knives are aimed at your back? Soon after, scandal erupts in print. A London paper splashes Edward's name with venom. The Duke of H seen again at Bond Street, escorting a lady not his Duchess. What debt, one wonders, is being paid this time? Edward storms through Harrington House, the paper crumpled in his fist, bellowing about lies and cowardice. Yet when Charlotte meets his fury with calm, then why does it feel true? He has no answer. Whispers breed like wildfire. At dinners, in clubs, his reputation falters. But society never leaves one target standing. Soon the gaze shifts, and the Duchess, so composed, too composed, and Lord James Winters at her side more than once. Americans are freer with their affections, aren't they? Charlotte feels the chill. What began as Edward's shame now drips like poison onto her name. At another glittering hall, she feels the eyes. A cough behind a fan, a smirk behind a glass. Later, a woman warns her in the powder room. Careful, Duchess. You wouldn't want to give people reason to believe the gossip. Charlotte smiles through gritted teeth. People will always believe what entertains them most. But her heart pounds because scandal doesn't require truth, only fuel. Then the storm bursts. Edward slams a door, his fury volcanic. Do you realize what they are saying? That you disgrace me with Winters? Charlotte stiffens. And what of your mistress on Bond Street? Shall we trade rumors, Edward? His answer is colder than the night. It is different. A man's indiscretions are tolerated. A woman's destroy her. The silence after cuts sharper than any shout. Charlotte whispers, voice like a blade. Then let them try. I will not be destroyed now. Pause a moment. Imagine this your husband shamed in public, and now society points its finger at you, accusing you of a scandal you never committed. Would you fight back openly, or weave a clever lie to redirect blame? Comment, fight if you'd confront them, or weave if you'd twist the story to your favor. But Charlotte doesn't wait for fate. In secret, she meets with Lady Margaret and the sisterhood of dollar duchesses. They want a scandal, Margaret says. Give them something else. A plan forms. A charity gala. Invite the Queen's confidants. Cloak herself in untouchable virtue. Appearances as armor. Every smile a weapon. And so the night arrives. Harrington House glows like a beacon, its ballroom alive with candlelight and music. Charlotte glides among the guests, her voice steady, her mask flawless. She speaks of hospitals, of schools, of noble causes. Every word chisels away at rumor, painting her as more than innocent and tarnished, untouchable. Even the Queen's representative nods in approval. The whispers soften, the tide turns. From across the ballroom, Lord James watches, his gaze lingering. Their eyes meet. For a heartbeat, the scandal they could ignite hangs between them. But Charlotte looks away, her composure perfect. For tonight, at least, her mask holds. Edward's fury erupted like a storm, his voice shaking the walls. Do you realize what they are saying? That you disgrace me with Winters? Charlotte did not flinch. Her reply was steady, sharp. And what of your mistress on Bond Street? Shall we trade rumors, Edward? His eyes burned with outrage. It is different. A man's indiscretions are tolerated. A woman's destroy her. The silence that followed was heavier than any shout. Charlotte whispered, her voice a blade, "Then let them try. I will not be destroyed." The narrator broke in. Imagine this your husband, shamed in public, and now society points its finger at you, accusing you of a scandal you never committed. Would you fight back openly, or weave a clever lie to redirect blame? Comment, fight if you'd confront them, or weave if you'd twist the story to your favor. In secret, Charlotte turned to Lady Margaret and the sisterhood of dollar duchesses. They want a scandal, Margaret declared. Give them something else. And so, a plan was born. Charlotte would host a charity gala, inviting the queens. Confidence, placing herself beneath the brightest, most respectable light. Every move rehearsed, every smile calculated. Appearances are your shield, Margaret whispered. Use them before they use you. The night of the gala arrived. Harrington House shimmered with candles, music flooding every corner. Guests poured in, dazzled by the spectacle. Charlotte glided through them like royalty, serene, untouchable. She spoke of hospitals, schools, charity, her every word painting her as virtuous, noble, beyond reproach. Even the Queen's representative nodded in approval. Whispers softened. The tide turned. Across the room, Lord James's eyes found hers. For a heartbeat, scandal flickered between them. But Charlotte looked away. Her mask held firm. Later, when the last guest had gone, Edward confronted her in the empty ballroom. You saved us tonight, he admitted. They speak of your grace, your charity. You have bought us time. Charlotte's gaze was cold. I saved myself, and in saving myself, I saved you. Remember that. For once, Edward had no reply. Alone at last, Charlotte removed her jewels before the mirror. Her reflection was perfect radiant, untouchable. But inside, her voice trembled. They nearly destroyed me, and I survived. But how many more storms can I weather before I am no longer myself? The narrator closed the moment. Scandal is a fire once, it licks at your name, it never fully leaves. Charlotte has beaten it back for now. But what will it consume next? The ballroom still carried the faint perfume of roses and wax. The charity gala had preserved Charlotte's reputation for now. She stood at the window, gazing out into the London fog. "They will not break me again," she whispered. "If they play in whispers, I will answer in silence." The narrator asked, "Would you fight openly when the world waits for you to stumble? Would you fight in shadows, unseen?" At Dalton's office, the plan unfolded. Small transfers, staggered, discreet, he explained. A necklace sold here, a charitable gift there. Soon, a foundation in your name abroad. Quiet, untouchable. Charlotte nodded. "And—" Edward Dalton's eyes narrowed. "He will notice eventually, but by then it will be too late." Charlotte leaned forward, her voice steady. "Then let us begin." The halls of Harrington House began to whisper a different story. Charlotte moved quietly, almost invisibly, but every step tilted the balance of power. She praised the loyal servants, rewarding them in small, deliberate ways. Their loyalty, once bound to Edward, now began to shift toward her. She adjusted the menus, ensuring food came from tenants' farms instead of Edward's wasteful suppliers. She arranged for broken roofs and chimneys to be repaired, slipping the costs through charitable accounts. Edward never noticed. To him, the household simply ran smoother, as though fortune itself had finally favored them. But in truth, beneath his very nose, Charlotte was building something new. Sometimes power does not roar. Sometimes it smiles so faintly. No one notices until the world has changed. Through the gatherings of the dollar duchesses, Charlotte reached further. She found women across London who shared her defiance. Together, they traded secrets, hidden trusts, estates, disguised as charities. Influence written in ledgers no man would bother to read. One woman whispered, "We are rewriting the rules," but in invisible ink, and Charlotte smiled. One day, those rules will be read. The narrator pauses to wonder. Charlotte chooses to rebel in silence through ledgers, influence, and shadows. But what would you choose? Would you fight loudly, risking everything, or quietly, ensuring survival? Comment loud if you'd rebel openly, or quiet if you'd weave power unseen. Yet shadows have weight. One evening, Edward's unease grew heavy. He sat in his study, ledger open, his brows tightening. The expenses, ... smaller. The estate more solvent. How? Across from him, Charlotte sipped her tea, calm, unshaken. "Perhaps fortune favors us, Edward." His eyes narrowed. "Or perhaps someone meddles where they should not." She met his gaze, her voice as steady as her resolve. "If it is meddling to keep Harrington House alive, then yes, Edward, I am guilty." He slammed the ledger shut, but he did not stop her. He could not. The countryside rolls out in quiet greens and greys, but something has changed. When Charlotte steps down from the carriage, the tenants don't merely bow, they approach. Shyly, hesitantly, but with gratitude heavy in their voices. "Your Grace, thank you." The roofs no longer leak, and the children have shoes. Charlotte feels their words like sunlight breaking through clouds. She had funneled the funds quietly, trusting Dalton's steady hand. Now she sees the results in patched chimneys, in children running barefoot no more. Across the courtyard, Edward stands apart, arms crossed. His face is unreadable, but the truth is clear. For the first time, Harrington's tenants are not whispering his name in thanks, but hers. Asterisk, asterisk, the chamber's mirror has been her torment, her judge. But tonight, when she lights the candle and leans close, the reflection stares back differently. She no longer sees the timid bride, cloaked in borrowed silks and borrowed power. she sees a woman sharpened by battle, her eyes steady, her mouth set with quiet authority. The Duchess' costume remains, pearls velvet, the Harrington crest heavy at her throat, but the woman inside no longer wears it as a mask. She commands it. Her lips curve, a whisper escaping. You tried to erase me, but I have written myself anew. Asterisk, asterisk, the hallway outside is silent until a shadow halts at her door. Edward's voice slips through the crack, low and deliberate. You change things, Charlotte. Too quietly, too well. Do not imagine I don't notice. The handle does not turn. His footsteps fade, slow, deliberate, leaving behind a silence heavy as iron shackles. Charlotte presses her hand against the mirror, her breath steady. If Edward is watching, let him. If he waits for her to falter, let him wait forever. The rebellion has begun in this fortress. She entered in chains, now hums with her command. Harrington House is shifting. Once Edward's fortress, it now bends, quietly, beneath Charlotte's will. But every rebellion, no matter how silent, eventually makes noise, and Edward is listening. The stone walls of Harrington House remain unchanged, its portraits, its endless corridors, its cold grandeur. Yet inside, everything is different. Once, Charlotte walked beneath the oil-painted dukes and duchesses, trembling beneath their judgment. Now, she walks steady, her gaze unflinching. They are not my masters, she thinks. They are my witnesses. The narrator whispers, when the walls that once caged you become walls, you command. What does freedom look like? At another gathering of London society, Charlotte feels the eyes upon her again. But the whispers have shifted. Her charities grow daily. She carries herself with such grace. The Queen herself favours her. When Charlotte curtsies before Queen Victoria once more, the monarch's nod is approving. England is steadied by women such as you. Charlotte bows with serenity. Inside, she smiles, not as a girl desperate for approval, but as a woman who knows she has earned it. Back at Harrington House, Edward sits across from her at dinner. His words are practical tenets, ledgers, appearances, but the tone is different. Not the iron of command, but the caution of recognition. He has seen her influence, felt her reach. He knows the estate breathes smoother under her hand, though the words of concession never leave his lips. His silence becomes its own admission. Charlotte lifts her glass, her voice calm, unwavering. To Harrington House may it endure. Edward raises his glass too, not in love, not in dominance, but in an uneasy equality, and in that quiet moment, power has shifted forever. At Claridge's, the sisterhood gathers once more. The dollar duchesses, women once dismissed as ornaments, now trade victories like secret treasures. One boasts of securing land in her children's names, another of forcing her husband into financial restraint. Charlotte adds her own, quietly but firmly, roofs repaired, tenants fed, accounts safeguarded abroad. Their voices weave into quiet defiance. We are not ornaments, Lady Margaret declares. We are architects. Charlotte's reply is calm, steady, and our ink will outlast their ledgers. Their laughter rises not loud, not reckless, but the sound of rebellion blooming into solidarity. Later, in her chamber, Charlotte returns to the mirror. Once, she had faced it as a stranger, pale, uncertain, buried beneath English gowns. But now, the woman in the glass stares back with steel in her eyes and calm in her smile. She whispers, Charlotte Miller, Duchess of Harrington. Both names are mine, and I will not surrender either. Charlotte has survived, transformed, and quietly seized her power. If you had lived her story, would you have chosen patience and strategize, risked everything for freedom? Comment strategy if you'd play the long game, or freedom if you'd run to Paris. The halls of Harrington House echo with her footsteps. Where once they felt like a cage, now they sound like her dominion. The portraits of dukes and duchesses look on, but their judgment no longer stings. She walks with her head high. She came to England as a poor nan, American fortune traded for an English crown. They tried to silence her voice, erase her laughter, diminish her very self. But Charlotte learned the truth. Survival is not always loud. Power does not always shout. Sometimes it whispers, reshaping the world until it belongs to you. At last, she stands by the great window, the city of London drowned in fog beyond the glass. Duty still presses heavy, but beneath it, an unbroken fire glows. Her voice is quiet, but resolute. I am an American spirit beneath an English crown, and I will write my own future. This was Charlotte's story, the story of a dollar duchess, and perhaps, one day, yours will be written too.